Evening. My name is Ken Gelnick. I'm the co-chair. I'm the chair of the Land Use Committee. Oral Selkridge is the co-chair of the committee. We are both here, and we are going to have there are actually basically two items on this agenda. Well, actually, there's a third one, which what we're basically going to do is hear from Planet Fitness, and then we'll have some questions from the gallery section, questions from the public, questions from the board, and if I sound like I'm fluffering about it, you're correct. In any event, first I would like to open with a minute of silence for the first responders and for our soldiers abroad.
She says she's having trouble logging. Oh.
Your access code or meeting number.
It's about a minute. You can see how long a minute is. Just remember, they have it a lot. Minutes are for them also. First, we're going to review we have a draft of the May 21, 2021 minutes. That was the meeting where we had the zoning for accessibility text. We distributed the minutes, but we did not vote on them at the time. I would like to call for a vote to accept the minutes as distributed. All in favor?
Second.
Thank you. I forgot that. All in is there anybody opposed to it? Hearing no opposition, I'm going to is there any abstentions? Hearing no opposition and no abstentions, and declare that the minutes have been adopted. Jeremy, thank you very much for sharing it with us. Next on the agenda, I have it printed out for myself. First, we're going to hear from Planet Fitness on the Board of Standards and on their application for a special permit, two special permits for two locations, one at 2129 White Plains Road, the other is at 1750 East Gun Hill Road. Who's going to, Mr. Villafano, or who's going to speak first for Planet Fitness? Mr. Villafano,
Hi, everyone.
And the
Hi,
other one,
Frank St. Jacques from Ackerman. I'm here with Chase Villafana from Planet Fitness. So we're land use counsel for Planet Fitness on these BSA applications.
Which of you would like to speak first?
I'll go ahead and speak. I have a really brief presentation for each location, and then myself and Chase are happy to answer any questions. But I could just dive into 1750 Gun Hill Road if that works for you.
Okay. As you can see from the agenda, after their presentation, we'll have 2 minutes from each member of the public. Then we'll have committee members, and we'll have a vote on this at the end. We'll have the recommendations of this at the end. Mr. St. Jacques, please go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And as I mentioned, I just have a brief presentation. Moment.
Can you hear me?
Ken, you might have to make him a presenter. I don't know if he has share privileges.
I think I'm all set. It looks like I'm accidentally sharing both of my presentations. Let me just take down one so that we can focus on the other. her so we can focus on it. Great. Can you guys see my screen? Excellent. So this location is 1750 East Gun Hill Road. This special permit, we're actually here seeking what's called an extension of term. PCE, or Physical Culture Establishment, or gym special permit, was initially granted both by Community Board 11 and then ultimately by the Board of Standards and Appeals back in 2011. Which allowed the Planet Fitness to operate at 1750 East Gun Hill Road. We filed this application to extend the term for an additional 10 years back in April of 2021. And since that time, the term has expired. And so we're here tonight to present this application both to extend the term and also to allow 24-hour operation all 7 days of the week. So it was initially granted such that Monday through Thursday, 24-hour operation was permitted, but then Fridays the gym closes at 10, and Saturdays and Sundays it's open from 7 to 7. So we're asking the community board and ultimately the BSA to extend that 24-hour to 7 days per week. As you can see on the zoning map, the site's located at Gunther Avenue on East Gun Hill Road. It's in an R32 and with a C21 overlay, which permits the BSA special permit. You can see from this land use map, the site is outlined in red. It might be a little difficult to see. Red on this map represents commercial uses, and purple is industrial or manufacturing uses. So you can see that this site is consistent with the context, which is commercial. I'll show you some photos here. This site is just on the ground floor of this portion of the building. It's within a shopping center with several other commercial uses. You can see here, it's right next to the Dollar Tree. There's also an Aldi, Dunkin' Donuts, a bank, and several other commercial uses. So again, this application is to extend that grant that expired in September for another 10 years, and then to extend that 24-hour operation from Monday through Thursday through 7 days per week. And then I believe this is the last slide. The gym itself is shown in this floor plan. It's just under 18,000 square feet. And it's a, sort of I'm sure you're familiar with Planet Fitness, but if you're not, it's sort of a traditional gym where people have memberships. They provide high quality fitness experience for low monthly rates. And their concept is that it's a judgment-free zone. So their goal is to be as inclusive as possible. And they do that with the low membership rates and also by offering 24-hour hours of operation so that as many people that are able to can attend the gym. So that concludes my presentation on 1750 East Gun Hill Road. And you tell me if your preference is to ask questions regarding this location or for me to present on White Plains Road next.
Well, I'd like you to present on both of them for both of them. Otherwise, we're never going to get out of here tonight.
Okay, so let me just pull up that. And again, this is a similarly brief presentation. It's almost exactly the same application. Here we go. So this is 2129 White Plains Road. Again, this application was granted around the same time back in 2011, both by Community Board 11 and ultimately by the Board of Standards and Appeals. This special permit was required to allow Planet Fitness to operate at this location at 2129 White Plains Road. We filed this application back in end of March, and then the term expired shortly after in June. And this application also seeks not only to extend the term of the special permit to allow Planet Fitness to continue operating, but also to extend those 24 hours of operation to 7 days per week. So you can see the site's located at 2129 White Plains Road at Leidig Avenue. It's within a C44 commercial zoning district. You can see on this area map, again, red represents commercial. White Plains Road is a commercial corridor, and this use is consistent with the context along White Plains Road. And you can see these photos. Planet Fitness occupies the entire second floor. It has a reception area on the first floor, and then it has additional room in the cellar floor. See that in these photos. Again, the purpose of the application. And then just 3 floor plans, the first showing the ground floor entrance area where patrons enter the gym and then either go upstairs. Let's try downstairs first to the cellar floor, just shy of 5,000 square feet. Contains fitness equipment, and then the larger second floor, which is just shy of 10,000 square feet, which contains additional fitness equipment, and then the restrooms and locker rooms in the staff office. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and myself and Chase from Planet Fitness are happy to answer any questions.
Case, do you have anything? Case, do you have anything to add to Mr. St. John's presentation?
I would add that I just, wanted to thank the community for just allowing us to be part of the community for over 10 years now. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've had such a great experience at these clubs, and we look forward to continuing to provide a value gym for everybody. So thank you.
All right. In line with the agenda, what I'm having is have the members of the public. Has any would anybody? What I would like you to do is to raise your hands, and let's see if we can do this. Raise your hand if you want. Sorry. Do any members of the public have any questions? Hearing none.
Yes, hello? I have a
Yes.
question, please.
Please identify
Can you
yourself.
hear me?
Please identify yourself first.
Okay. My name is Roxanne Delgado. I have one
But,
little
Ms.
small
Delgado,
question, please.
there's a 2-minute limit on this. As
Sorry,
per the
what?
agenda. There's a
I
2-minute
can't hear you.
limit.
What?
Ms.
I
Delgado,
don't have a
there's a
question. I don't
2-minute,
have a statement.
there's a
Hold on, Kenny,
2-minute limit for your questioning from the members of the public. 2 minutes starting now.
Yes. Well, my question is the White Plains bid located in the White Plains location? I was told that the White Plains bid has an office in that White Plains location. Is that correct or not?
I actually don't know that offhand. Chase, are you aware if the Business Improvement District office is also located within that building? I apologize. I'm just not aware of the other tenancy besides the store that's located on the first floor.
Okay, I only ask because what the bid told me that they rent an office in that location, but when I visit that location, I don't see any office depicting it's a bid office. Just wondering if you had any, if you could provide any information on that. If not, it's okay. I'll ask somewhere else.
I'm sorry, I don't. My understanding is it's just the Planet Fitness and the variety store within the building.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Sorry about that.
Any other members of the public have any questions? Hearing none, I'm going to go on to the members of the committee. Does any of the committee members have any questions about this application, about these applications?
No, I just this is Oral Selkridge from the co-chair, and I know the Planet Fitness gym pretty well. I'm in walking distance to it. Pretty nice gym. A lot of people in my neighborhood attend the gym. It's really nice. are you did you do any improvements over the COVID period when you were closed for a while? And can you tell me if there were any improvements done as far as ventilation and things of that sort, or it was fine?
I'm going to let Chase take this one because I know they did quite a bit, but he can get into specifics.
Sure. Yeah, we most definitely did. Yeah, I'm not sure how familiar you are when Governor Cuomo set his original mandate
Right.
allowing gyms to reopen, but in order for us to reopen, we did have to upgrade our HVAC systems to MERV 13 standard filtration, which was definitely a big undertaking. We have just about 60 stores in New York City alone, but that was one of the items that we did during that time, and we have a really rigorous, I should say, amount of cleaning, sanitization, and just general, honestly, kind of management that goes into all these new processes since COVID happened, and we're going to continue to practice all of those processes as we move forward as a company.
That's fantastic. That's what I wanted to hear. Okay, and are you limiting the amount of people that can occupy the space, or you're pretty confident in the mechanical system being able to ventilate the space well enough for the amount of people who do attend?
Yeah, that we actually looked at that with our team of engineers, and we definitely came to the conclusion that the amount of people that are actually coming in during, each, let's call it hour per hour, we're
Right.
well under, kind of any type of even former, when there was occupancy limits that the mayor and the governor had in place, we were well under that. But even with the HVAC turnover between the fresh air, the actual mechanical filtration that we've upgraded to, we're very, very comfortable. And all of our members have been very comfortable, obviously, in coming back to the gym, and we're very happy to be back. I think that's the most important thing, to be able to provide such an outlet, right? Everyone's been cooped up for so long, just to get people back to restaurants and gyms and movie theaters, to have everyone have some type of semblance of normalcy, I think is just so critical. So, but yes, to answer your original question, we did definitely do some upgrades, and we feel very confident not only in our own abilities, but engineers reviewing all of the data. So thank you.
Great. That's what I wanted to hear. That sounds good. Okay. It makes me feel good about it. Thank you.
You're
Are
welcome.
there any, okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Who is?
Hey,
any other
Ken, this is John.
Oh, good. Good evening.
Good evening. Hey, this is John Johnson. I'm part of Committee Board 11. Chase, question for you. The White Plains Road and the Gun Hill Road site. I actually attend the Gun Hill Road site. Very nice club. The only thing that I'm a little concerned, you're going 24 hours on Friday night and Saturday, and it's just all 24 hours. Are you doing anything different at nighttime versus the daytime? Any enhanced staffing, less staffing? What are your concerns in this neighborhood, leaving something open 24/7?
For specifically to the Gun Hill Road site, it's a shopping center. In terms of staffing, all of our staff is trained to operate 24 hours. We have security camera systems, we have exterior lighting, we've looked at parking lot lighting, which is another obviously critical element. We just want people to feel comfortable when you're leaving the gym, that you're not going into an area that you feel just like there's no one around, right? So I know there's some security that's been put in place over the years, even by the landlord in terms within the parking lot, and the lighting levels in the parking lot have been checked out by our teams. We've also had, the biggest thing for me, right, always is just the feedback from members, and members like yourself, is we haven't had any complaints or issues with the current 24-hour operation within the Gun Hill Road location.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
What about the White Plains Road location? It's Ken Yellington. Do you have any complaints about that? Because There you don't have a parking lot. Obviously, it's a slightly different operation. Chase?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely a different demographic area. I mean, most of the people are accessing that location via subway, and walking and buses. But this, the same situation, I would say that similar situation of all of our clubs. We operate clubs in Massachusetts, in New York, California, and Hawaii, and our staff is all trained the same way. We're operating 24 hours, and our staff needs to be aware of all of the things that come with, obviously dealing with the public, but we also want people to be smart in the sense, and meaning people, our staff, to be smart in the sense of catering to our customers' needs and concerns. And that's kind of paramount for us. And if there are issues that come about, that those issues go to general managers, regional managers, and normally back to me. And I can say, since we've been there, I have not heard of anything that, would affect 24-hour operation negatively for any, member of the community or for our staff.
Chase, are you considering, or are you planning to increase security because of the 24-hour operation?
Well, security itself, meaning like security companies, we don't have a physical security company presence within the gym. Our security within the premises is the same 24 hours a day. We rely on our heavily trained staff. We rely on camera systems. We also obviously rely on exterior lighting. The building on White Plains Road in Lydig is a new building. That building has plenty of exterior lighting. We feel it's very well lit within the perimeter, or around the perimeter, I should say, of the building. And we feel very confident that we'll continue to operate successfully there.
Okay, thank
Ken?
you. Yeah.
And if I may comment, I know in the beginning there was an issue with locker break-ins, but I did work with the PD. Well, I could put the PD in touch with Planet Fitness, and I believe that issue was resolved. I'm sure you have issues here and there, but I don't think it was anything that egregious, if that matters.
Well, I think that we're more concerned with the interaction outside of the Planet Fitness, because more than if they don't do something right for their people in there, they're not going to have, the members are not going to renew their membership, and that's I assume it's one of your main concerns. Make sure everybody renews it and keeps on going.
Well, actually, Jeremy did. That's a good point, because that was happening for a little bit. I know Chase is probably familiar with it. It happened to a few people in my neighborhood where their lockers were broken into within Planet Fitness. But I think that, like Jeremy said, maybe it has been resolved as to why that was happening, and what happened, and if they're planning to make sure that, I know it's difficult to keep that under control, but do you recall that, Chase, when is a brief case where there were some locker break-ins? Do you recall that?
I think when we were originally open, there was definitely some issue that had come about. And I know the implementation, as far as I remember, of security lockers at our clubs was a very big push, probably I'd say about 10 years ago. And what we have is, when you come into our facility, when you're entering the locker room, we have a set of security lockers. They're basically cubby lockers. They're smaller, where you can store your valuables. If people don't, if you're not just throwing your shirt in a locker and you feel uncomfortable, we're giving an alternate. We're saying, okay, you're not going to work out with your wallet. You're not going to work out with your keys in your hand. Here's another locker, a set of lockers that we actually have on security cameras, because obviously we're not allowed to have.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we're not allowed to have locker cameras in the locker room. So we came up with another idea of putting lockers where it's security lockers with a camera system right overhead, which is done wonders for us.
Wow, I didn't know that. That sounds fantastic. I'm gonna show up now at the gym. You know, I'll be there. Yeah, I used to live in the gym years ago. I'm an ex-Olympian. I ran in the Olympics years ago.
Perfect.
Yeah, I ran the 400-meter hurdles, and back in 1988.
Now listen, I know when I don't get to the gym every day, it does something to me. By the end of the day, I'm just hankering to get back there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's good. I'll definitely check out the gym on Gun Hill Road. I'm nearest to that one. Fantastic, fantastic, Chase. Thanks.
Good to hear.
Any more questions from members of the committee? If so, then
Just Ken, just a quick thing. Just Jeremy, can you please make sure you have Chase's information, or just in case, you know, things go well now, when there's anything, if we have a problem, we want to be able to have a direct contact.
Jeremy, I'm happy to send that over by
Great
email.
idea.
I know
That's a
we've
great
been in
idea.
touch the past few days.
Yeah, I know. If you don't believe me, you can look me up on the internet. You'll see my race on the internet. Seriously, you'll see it.
I'm gonna check it out. I might
know,
challenge
I
you
know.
to a race next time, though.
I race against Edwin Moses. If you heard of him,
Oh, gosh.
yeah. In
I have not, but I'm gonna check it out.
Oh, okay.
okay, then in that case, Mr. St. Jock and Mr. Villafana, we're going to thank you very much for your presentation. If you want to wait, we will be voting on this at the end. If you want to wait around, you're welcome to, or or to come back in on the meeting. And now we're going to see. Who do we have from Department of City Planning? We actually have a few people. We got Ben
Thanks
Huff.
so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you.
Frank,
you,
Frank,
Chase.
thank you, Chase. Well, who's going to speak? Mr. Lopez or Commissioner Lopez or?
Hi, yes, Ken. Yeah, this is hi. My name's Ben Huff. I'm a senior planner at Department of City Planning's Transportation Division. We are currently proposing a citywide text amendment on Sidewalk Cafe regulations. So we have been doing a lot of these presentations. Navarro and I have been to many of the Bronx community boards. The public review period, official public review period for open restaurants text amendment ended on Friday, but we're still coming to the community boards. We're hoping to get feedback. We have the public hearing at the City Planning Commission on this Wednesday, and we expect the commission to vote early November. I'll go over that timeline a little bit later, but we're hoping to get feedback and potentially a vote from you guys tonight on our project. I'll share my screen, Navarro. Navarro is going to present first, sort of on the overall.
Stuff. All we can do is recommend to the full board. We can't even give the recommendation to the full board.
Yep.
Right?
Understood. Yep. So I will. I'm going to share screen and then let me get this going.
I just want to point out the nicety of Navarro multitasking.
Yeah, he's doing a really good job.
There's going to be giving the presentation, everybody. So sorry
Yeah.
if you don't understand.
So Navarro.
Sure, I'll take it from here. Actually, Ben, can you go to the second slide? Right. Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. My name's Navarro Lopez. I'm the Bronx Borough Commissioner for the New York City Department of Transportation. And for the next 10 minutes or so, I'll be taking us through where things stand from a more programmatic standpoint with permanent open restaurants, which will continue to give restaurants the option of sidewalk and roadway dining. The program will look to better balance the many needs of the street and sidewalk, keeping both restaurants and other users in mind. And we're going to take what has and what hasn't worked in the past, both pre-COVID and now during the emergency when developing the future guidelines. I want to make it clear that while this presentation will cover both sidewalk and roadway dining, DOT and city planning are asking the board tonight for your opinion on this specific sidewalk cafe text amendment. Next slide. As you know, the city had street and sidewalk cafes before COVID, but far fewer of them. Excuse me. Sorry, give me 1 second. Yes. So as you know, the city had street and sidewalk cafes before COVID, but far fewer of them. The majority of the cafes were administered by the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. DOT did run one small pilot of public roadway seating, which we call street seats, but there were only 25 setups, mostly in Manhattan. Our understanding is that the relatively low participation in the DCWP program was in large part due to cost and process. Next slide. During COVID, New York City suspended existing rules through an emergency executive order, and DOT was directed to create the Open Restaurants program, allowing restaurants to conduct their business in the public right-of-way. Since the launch of the program over 1 year ago, over 11,000 restaurants have participated, which has helped save about 100,000 restaurant jobs. By many accounts, this program has been a lifesaver, not just to the restaurant industry, but also to the city that has seen the incredible vitality that outdoor dining can bring to our streets and sidewalks. Next slide. Oh, excuse me for 1 second. Over the past year, we have learned lessons that highlight the opportunities and challenge that will be critical to informing how we proceed with creating a permanent program. We think the robust use of the emergency program was helped by 3 things. Oops. First, unlike the pre-emergency sidewalk cafe program, no location was off limits. Any restaurant with ground floor frontage and sidewalk or roadway space that met the criteria could participate. Second, the program was free and easy to access, unlike the pre-COVID sidewalk cafe program, which required months of multiple reviews by multiple agencies. And third, the element of roadway dining gave brand new options to restaurants, particularly those that might not have enough room on the sidewalk to accommodate a cafe. It is worth noting that we encountered a few challenges from the emergency program. First, the speed of the rollout and the fact that the program was built from scratch under emergency circumstances created some confusion. As DOT learned more about operating a program like this, and the program was extended by the mayor into the winter, some of the guidelines had to change along the way to keep everyone safe. Second, throughout the program, DOT learned more about the challenges specific to roadway seating. For instance, we heard from other agencies such as FDNY and MTA that there were issues of turning radius and safety signs being blocked. Safety is of the utmost importance here and will remain so, and we will continue to work with our agency partners on that. Third, enforcement has been complicated on multiple fronts. On the one hand, you have a lot of restaurants who are dealing with many issues and who felt over-squeezed and over-inspected by too many different people. On the other hand, you have some communities, particularly the mobility impaired, concerned about under-enforcement. Next slide.
Sorry.
That being said, the program has seen tremendous participation, and in April, the City Council overwhelmingly voted in favor of the bill to make it permanent. This required changing a number of different laws that control outdoor dining in non-emergency situations. All right. Yep. Hold on. Next slide.
Is this a correct one?
Oh yes, to start, we anticipate that as in the emergency, DOT will administer a permanent option for both sidewalk seating and roadway seating with similar rules to the current Sidewalk Cafe, but available citywide. We want to be sensitive to the traveling public, minding sidewalk clear paths and other rules around sound and hours of operation. Next slide. When finalized, specific design guidelines will be very clear and will revolve around these principles that balance the use of sidewalk space by a restaurant, but maximize the experience of openness and activation to the general public. For most of the city, we're proposing requiring an 8-foot minimum clear path or half the sidewalk width, whichever is greater. In some areas with higher foot traffic, the city is currently proposing a minimum of a 12-foot clear path or half the sidewalk width, whichever is greater. And in some special cases where it may still make sense to allow a sidewalk cafe despite a narrow sidewalk, we are looking at creating a waiver that would allow the clear path to go down to 6 feet. However, this waiver would be co-reviewed by DOT and the Mayor's Office of Peoples with Disabilities. Next slide. We think the introduction of the roadway option is a tremendous new opportunity for restaurants, especially those who may have narrow sidewalks. The city is working on how this will be set up permanently, but we will have setups in parking lanes, except in prohibited zones, maintain public safety, have clear guidance and enforcement on sound, and also comply with the American with Disabilities requirements. In the future, any roadway setup will have to look more like what's in this slide, not the fully enclosed structures that we've seen a lot of. Next slide. The city is proposing that the new program will not operate during colder months, but we may allow for a hardship waiver that would allow some restaurants to keep their setups in place. But this is still being developed and is yet to be determined. Currently, under the emergency program, all restaurants will be able to keep operating uninterrupted through this upcoming 2021-2022 winter season. Next slide. In looking at both moving the legal authority to run the program to DOT and in creating new processes for the roadway setups, the city is looking to streamline the review process as much as possible, while leaving in place the essential role of agency and public review. Next slide. To make this permanent program a reality, 3 steps are needed to advance it. The focus for today is the removal of locational prohibitions through zoning. It's the key to unlocking the full citywide universe of applicability and consolidating control and accountability for the program under a single city agency. We are also working with the City Council, who strongly supports this program, to enact appropriate legislation which will update the laws governing sidewalk cafes and then create a new set of laws and rules to govern roadway cafes. Next slide. Following zoning and legal changes, we anticipate rulemaking that formalizes many of the program's future design and future application details. And then soon afterwards, we plan on opening up a formal application window for a new permanent open restaurants program. Though we are at the beginning of a process of developing the future program, the current emergency program is expected to be in effect as is for the next 1.5 years. The expectation is that restaurants will have ample time to transition into a new process, if they choose to, with minimal operational disruption. Changing zoning is the first critical step to making this program permanent. But as you can see on the timeline, there are multiple steps to developing the full program. During each step, we welcome public input and public review. Next slide. COVID-19 has really shaped the way New Yorkers think about how our streets can be used, which has been a silver lining to the pandemic. We welcome feedback and encourage all to visit our website and submit comments as we develop all the elements of a permanent program. Once again, the roadway portion of this presentation is preliminary, and our primary purpose of presenting to the board tonight is to gather feedback on City Planning's proposed text amendment changes that specifically deal with sidewalk cafes. With that, I'll turn it back to Ben to talk about those changes.
Thanks, Navarro. So tonight before the board, just focusing on the zoning text amendment, which is the removal of geographical restrictions on where sidewalk cafes can be located. The goal is to expand the universe of sidewalk cafes. So what the zoning proposal is we are proposing to delete Article 1, Chapter 4 in its entirety, effectively removing zoning locational restrictions on sidewalk cafes. This will also remove any language that prevents sidewalk cafes in special districts, removing rules around enclosures, operable windows, sidewalk widenings that would preclude or limit outdoor dining, and just general cleanup of text and references to sidewalk cafes throughout the zoning resolution. So again, this will allow any restaurant to potentially apply to DOT for the sidewalk cafe, as long as they can meet the appropriate sidewalk conditions and setting criteria. So to give a quick overview, we in March of 2020, there were 27,000 restaurants in New York City, majority of which are in Manhattan, but many of which are in the outer boroughs as well. And these range from like small cafes to sort of medium destination restaurants to multi-level catering halls. For the purpose of this presentation, we're really just referring to restaurants with ground floor frontage, because those are the only ones that will have access to applying for a sidewalk cafe. So how sidewalk cafe regulations worked, the public or community boards could look at the zoning regulations in City Planning's Zola mapping application, which you could see a link to at the bottom below. So in yellow are areas of the city where only small cafes were allowed. These are cafes that can only extend 4.5 feet out from the building. They are limited in sort of addressing these higher traffic areas of the city. In purple, you could have small or unenclosed cafes. So unenclosed cafes are typically what existed pre-COVID. So these are cafes that allow readily removable tables, chairs, and fencing. No sort of overhead other than umbrellas or retractable roofs. And these had to meet an 8-foot clear path or 50% on larger streets, 50% if it was bigger than 8 feet. And in green, it allowed all cafes. So this was small and unenclosed, as well as enclosed cafes, which are defined as sort of extensions of the building into the sidewalk. So they're enclosed, but the walls required 50% transparency, and they also had to meet an 8-foot clear path. I think what's more important is sort of showing where sidewalk cafes were not allowed. So this is the areas in red, which I'll go into more specifics of that, what that entailed, and blue, which are the residential areas of the city. So this zoning text amendment won't allow restaurants as of right in residential districts, but there are non-conforming restaurants in residential areas of the city. Many times these restaurants predate the zoning of the district, and they were not eligible to apply for sidewalk cafes in the past. So as a result of open restaurants, as Navarro mentioned, 11,500 restaurants, over 11,500 restaurants have participated. We've seen a surge of outdoor dining in the outer boroughs, close to 6,000, and 10,000 restaurants citywide have used the sidewalk as part of their outdoor dining setup. So These sidewalk cafes will be limited by zoning if we don't move forward with this text amendment. We have done some numbers and sort of comparing where these open restaurants are versus our old zone, the zoning regulations, which are currently suspended. And there's 2,500 restaurants who would lose their ability to apply to outdoor dining past the emergency if this zoning text amendment doesn't pass. So in red are restaurants that are in areas that were specifically prohibited. So these include certain special districts, certain commercial mid-blocks, on streets that have elevated rail lines, or other named high congestion areas. In blue are the non-conforming restaurants in residential districts. And yellow are limited to just the small cafe designation only. So again, the other zoning technical cleanup that will occur as part of it, removing definitions and cross references, removing the text that precludes operable windows, removing the enclosure provision that requires restaurants to be in a fully enclosed building, and clarifying sidewalk widening text to ensure that it doesn't conflict with open restaurants. So if we're to zoom into Community District 11, cafes were allowed along major corridors like Boston Road, Gun Hill Road, Morris Park Avenue, and Tremont Avenue. But they were not allowed where the elevated 2-5 train is and any of these residential zones. And you can see there were just 2 cafes that existed pre-COVID. They're both purple, sort of in the center of the map. Yeah, so these are the 2 sidewalk cafes that were eligible pre-COVID. This is another map of them. So during open restaurants, we've seen 38 restaurants participate in the open restaurants program. So 2 are in areas that are prohibited by zoning, and 3 are in residential areas that did not allow cafes. So the majority of restaurants in the Community Board 11 would have been eligible under the old rules, but there are a handful that would lose their ability to apply. So that's our presentation today. I just want to emphasize, there's been some misperception, and this is partly on, the presentation that we developed. We're not fully stripping the rules and regulations for how sidewalk cafes operate. So, there was zoning regulations, but then there's admin code rules. So the admin code rules will be updated in a CAPA rulemaking process that will move the oversight of the Sidewalk Cafe program from the Department of Consumer and Workforce Protection to the Department of DOT. So we're just removing sort of the geographical restrictions to this zoning text amendment. And furthermore, like, all the rules will be suspended regardless through this emergency program. And then at the launch of the new program, we'll have those rules in place. And as part of the CAPA rulemaking process, DOT, city planning, we will have to come back to the public for input on sort of the development of those. And we've definitely heard at a lot of community boards a lot of interest and concern on the roadway cafes. That, again, is not part of this text amendment. Zoning doesn't go into the street. So this text amendment won't legalize the roadway structures. It's just expanding the geography of where sidewalk cafes are allowed. And part of that CAPA rulemaking process is also fleshing out the rules for the roadway program, and DOT will be back to have further discussion and input on that. So that's our presentation on the open restaurants text amendment, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. First, we're going to hear from the members of the public. Does any members of the public have any questions for Mr. Huff or for
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez?
Yes. Roxanne Delgado. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to say that I'm fully in support of this rezoning or text amendment because we need to support our small businesses. And unfortunately, some of our small businesses in Pelham Parkway have been targeted by several members who either weaponize 311 or the community board to go against one or two business owners, and some think it's based on bigotry. I don't know what to say. So I think in order to minimize the attacks on this specific business, Curvins, I think this might be an added protection, so they will leave this owner alone and stop harassing her over her outdoor dining, which is as a result of the pandemic. I mean, there's no fault to them that we have a pandemic. So I hope this passed. I think the mayor and the city council are both in support of it. And I hope Community Board 11 supports it as well. Thank you.
Any questions from any other members of the public? No, thank you for hearing no more questions. Members of the committee. Any
Oh,
of the
sorry,
committee have any questions?
I'm a member of the public, Diana Finch,
Ms.
with
Finch,
Bronx Park
yes.
East Community Association. I was just a little unclear about the difference between the sidewalk and the roadway. And if an establishment has a roadway set up now, is that grandfathered in after 2022?
No, there won't be any grandfathering of anything that popped up during the emergency program. You know, so sidewalk cafe regulations exist in zoning. This text amendment, we're seeking to modify to remove that so that there isn't geographic restrictions on who can apply for a sidewalk cafe. The focus will be on
if the restaurant's in a location where the sidewalk is too narrow for a sidewalk setup.
Right. So in the admin code,
is
right.
that going to be continued, or is that going to not be continued?
So yeah. So Ben, actually, if I could answer, yes. So we are going to have in the future, once the what we're going to develop is a new program that will allow for both sidewalk cafes, but also outdoor dining in the roadway, in the parking lane. But we're going to develop, you know, so for during the emergency program, the emphasis was on how to make it as easy as possible within, you know, certain limits for restaurants to apply for both sidewalk cafe and roadway seating. And actually, Ben, I don't know if you could go back to the slide. I think it was slide 9 or 10 that showed an image of roadway seating. Could we go back to that? Yeah, next slide, I think. Yeah, so Diana, this is sort of a preliminary sketch of how we envision future roadway dining will look like. The future program will have the option, if, you know, the parking lane in front of the establishment allows it, for restaurants to put out tables and chairs in the roadway, but we're going to change the regulations a bit. The main change is that in the future, we're not going to allow fully enclosed structures in roadway seating. And the other change is that we are not going to allow roadway seating to be in the roadway year round. We're going to probably limit it to the warm weather months, probably from April to, let's say, late October. I mean, that still needs to be developed, and we still need to bring a draft proposal to all the community boards throughout the city. But right now, our thinking is we would only allow roadway dining during the warm months, whereas sidewalk cafes we envision would be permitted year round. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. And if a restaurant has a roadway structure now, they might not be allowed to continue having a roadway structure. They would have to be open on all sides.
Right.
Couldn't be enclosed. I get that. But if they have a structure now in the roadway, will they be able to stay in the roadway?
They will be able to apply for a new permit, but we will have a window where the old program will wind down, and we will give establishments the ability to apply for a new permit for open dining in the roadway. And to get that permit, they need to follow the new regulations we're going to be developing. So if they have, let's say, a setup that is fully enclosed, that will not be permitted under the new rules. But we're still a long ways from there. We envision that the temporary program that's in effect right now will be in effect for another year and a half. And the reason for that is we want to, one, have a significant period of time for public input and public comment. But the other reason is to give restaurants a lot of time to transition from the current rules to the rules of the permanent program.
Yeah, and Diana, this is a really good question. If I could just weigh in real quick. So, the emergency program is executed through executive order and is a suspension of current zoning and admin code rules. So we are now sort of in the process of making changes to those rules to launch the permanent program in the future at the end of 2022. So this is not going to allow someone that has a certain setup to sort of stay, like they won't be grandfathered in. They will have to meet and comply to the permanent program, but we're giving them a window to transition to that. We've gotten criticized that we're moving too fast, too slow from different sides, but we're following ULERP process for the text amendment, which is only related to sidewalk cafes. And then we'll be going through the capital rulemaking process for fleshing out the roadway cafe rules. I heard you briefly mention like narrow sidewalks. I think that's the reason why we want to offer both a sidewalk and roadway cafe program in the permanent program. There are sidewalks that are too narrow to accommodate sidewalk cafes because they have to meet an 8-foot clear path. They're supposed to be meeting it during the emergency program. We know that there are restaurants that have not. We've been working with them to sort of bring them into compliance with that. And in the future program, we'll have an 8-foot clear path for the majority of the city that restaurants will have to meet, and a 12-foot clear path on busy corridors as well. So, we want to make sure that pedestrian traffic flow can still be met, but have the flexibility for restaurants to apply and participate if they want to. But for those that are on extremely narrow sidewalks, maybe in a residential street with low foot traffic, if it's not a bus zone or has a hydrant in front of it, they may be able to build a roadway cafe.
Okay, thanks. Because I think a lot of the restaurant owners heard, oh, the open restaurants is now become permanent. And they don't realize that there are, in fact, a lot of modifications coming to it.
Okay.
Well,
And we're going to be, oh, sorry, Ben.
No.
Go ahead, Navarro.
We appreciate it, but we also have to get to the rest of the members of the committee. And I'd like to now open up the questioning from the members of the committee for Commissioner Lopez and for Mr. Huff.
Ken, can I just quickly, before you go to the committee members, I just want to answer that question. Simply that, we're going to be using the next year to really do a lot of outreach to communities and to the restaurants, because we're going to want input, from the restaurants. We're also going to want input from the communities to understand how to best develop the new permanent program. So there is going to be ample warning to restaurants through, we've been able to develop a very robust method of reaching out to all of them through the program. So we're going to use that to communicate the new rules when we have sometime early next year, a draft proposal for the restaurants and for the public to review. So there's going to be a lot of time for folks to comment, and there'll be significant time for the restaurants to transition from their current setups to a new setup.
Thank you. Members of the committee, do any members of the committee have any questions?
Well, yeah, I do have a few questions, but some of it is probably really difficult and hard to answer.
Earl, you want to start?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
So there are some, I guess I just wanted to find out what are some of the legal issues as far as owning a shop that's built within a certain property line, right? And then now we're building outside of that property line, where now you're taking up room on the roadway, right? And if there's an incident, whatever, or maintaining that roadway, I guess within that certain square footage of the allowed restaurant area that's going to be given or loaned or rented to the restaurant owner to use that roadway. What have you looked at some of the legal issues as far as anything happening in that roadway? Whatever can happen, the restaurant owner is responsible, but anything that happens on the roadway, who's responsible for that? And I guess, and also maintaining that roadway in that area where those tables and chairs are. How far around do the restaurants maintain? Will it be within their property line, or can they, if a restaurant's on a corner, does it turn the corner where it occupies another like a drugstore, but they extend that restaurant? I've seen that too, where the restaurant part extends even past their property into another area that's obviously adjacent to like a drugstore, but there are tables and chairs in the roadway there. Will the text amendment address those issues too? I guess it's a lot. I have more questions, but maybe
No, can we
So
get
so
them
let
one
me
at a
just
time?
simply
I don't want to lose.
go.
Yeah.
So the first is that, as part of the application process and part of granting a permit to a restaurant for roadway cafe seating, there are going to be certain requirements. Some are listed on this slide. Others we're still developing. It's possible we're going to have some insurance requirements in the event of anything happens. But the focus is going to be on how to require restaurants that want roadway seating to develop something that is safe for the customers inside of it, that is visible to motorists and pedestrians outside of it. So that, we'll be coming back to talk more about that in the future, but that's still being developed. The text amendment doesn't deal with anything in the roadway. It only deals with the sidewalk cafes, because the text amendment prohibits sidewalk cafes in certain parts of the city. There is currently no prohibition in the zoning resolution as to where restaurants going to have roadway cafe seating. But it's best to really have one program that offers both options to the restaurants, that's administered by one agency, in this case DOT. So one set of rules for every restaurant throughout the city. But
Yeah.
in terms of, oh, sorry, Ben.
This brings up some really good points, and we actually had this discussion with the City Planning Commission today on a couple of these. So you brought up real quickly about buildings extending beyond their business frontage. That will not be allowed in the permanent program. So restaurants will be limited to their business frontage for their sidewalk, roadway cafes. They can't wrap around a corner and cut off a crosswalk. There is a minimum distance from the crosswalk, which is in the guidance right now. That's, numbers we've worked out with FDNY and other agencies concerned with turning radii and sight lines. Restaurants will have to have insurance for their outdoor dining. In the previous program, as they had sidewalk cafes, they were responsible for that. You brought up a good point on property lines. I think sidewalk cafes and roadway cafes, it's assuming outside of the property line. So if you're applying for a sidewalk cafe, it's from the building line to the curb is where the cafe counts. So if a building's set back and that's in their property line, I'm pretty sure they're allowed to add that to their cafe, and that would not count against their clear path requirement. I'm thinking of an example of like a single building setback, and their property line comes out a bit. But the sidewalk cafe, it's limited to the sidewalk. They'll have to meet a clear path. And just real quickly, you brought up about adjacent construction. We're in an emergency program that is suspended rules right now. So this is sort of a pilot program, but it's it's working much differently than the permanent program is planned to work. But you know, the way the cafes right now, it's a self-certified program, it's free. In the permanent program, it's a revocable consent that they will have to pay fees on, and there'll be administrative teeth where the city will be able to take the space back should it be necessary for something like, you know, DEP has to upgrade the water main pipes, or DOT is remilling it. So there's
Right.
going to be a lot more in that revocable consent that would require the restaurant to temporarily remove their outdoor dining in the need in the event that the city needs the space or adjacent construction. We do think outdoor dining could work with scaffolding as long as it's not affecting the clear path requirement. And that existed in DCWP's rules before. Yeah, no, these are all really good questions. So I hope that covered a good amount. Let me know if I can clarify at all.
Yeah, it does, but there's so much I think we have to look at, because like in Europe they have a wider sidewalk and more building frontage, and also the buildings are set back. But here in New York it's a lot different. It's working now and I like it, but to make it something permanent, that's going to be a very interesting process. And I just think
Well, we,
that, go ahead.
oh, sorry. So to the requirements about the sidewalk, I mean, right in the presentation, I mentioned that we're looking at either an 8-foot minimum path or a 12-foot minimum path. And that's just sort of right now where the thinking is. I think when we come back to you early next year with a draft proposal, you know, it could be that those requirements may have to be adjusted, but we do envision a scenario where definitely on very busy corridors in the Bronx and throughout the city, the minimum path requirement will be wider than 8 feet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
and
because
the
as more and more
requirement,
people get out there on the street, I'm
right.
thinking that you know, right now it was during COVID and there were less people in the street, but now, as you know, we're 100% back, and even I'm noticing a big difference. Even when I'm going to Sidewalk Cafe and I sit down in them, there's a lot more people walking, a lot more traffic, and like how do you combat that? That's fun. I mean, and also just safety, especially if you move the cafe, Sidewalk Cafe, into a roadway. Um, like you're saying, sturdy barriers. What does that? What does sturdy barriers mean on all three sides? Is that a concrete barrier? Is that just a planters with dirt inside of it? What are the requirements for a sturdy barrier, or is just a wood paneling partition there? I'm not sure. What does that mean?
So again, we're going to have we don't have those, you know, we're still in the process of developing the requirements and what we're going to ask restaurants to do. So I just asked, you know, for some patience,
Okay.
because we're going to come back
Understood.
next year. We're going to have a more robust conversation about what the regulations for sidewalk cafe dining and roadway cafe dining is. And these are
Yeah.
all great questions. These are all issues that we are going to be considering when drafting the new rules. But when we come back next year, we're going to speak about those issues in detail.
Look, I'm a trained architect. I'm an architect for the city. It's just that there's so many things that even I have to look at when I'm looking at things for the city. I work for the city also, and just that to understand the entire process that you're going through right now and how you're going to address this issue as far as safety, pedestrian safety, putting in you know, property line, tax levies. How will there be taxed? You know, is it square footage added to the building and not to
Well,
it to increase the seating capacity? I'm not sure.
so I mean, there'll be a cost for the permit. You know, I don't believe this is being added to the property. This is, you know, as Ben said earlier, this is a revocable consent, and revocable consents already exist within the DOT rules, where we grant a property owner permission to use the sidewalk. However, the understanding that the city can remove it at any time for any reason, regarding public safety or construction or what have you. So I think that we know one of the things we do sort of envision is that we will, unlike today, where it's sort of this application process you fill out online and it's self-certified, the future program will have a bit more robust application process. We're going to want folks to submit what their proposal is. We're going to review it. We're going to figure out how we engage the public on that.
Right.
And then we would grant the permit for a couple of years. And then the other change is just how we do enforcement, because that's a big piece of how any future program is going to work. We envision that we're going to be creating a dedicated enforcement division within DOT that will specifically address any issues or complaints with outdoor dining. Right now, that's not the case. Right now, we have sort of, this hodgepodge of enforcement where we're borrowing inspectors from throughout our agency and, also requiring assistance from Department of Buildings.
Yeah, buildings department.
The future program won't be like that. The future program, there'll be a very clear line of authority. It's administered by DOT, run by DOT, enforced by DOT. And we do envision, again, while we still have not developed what the enforcement schedule is going to be exactly, there will be more robust enforcement, and we will have the ability to crack down sooner on bad actors. And by that, I mean establishments that are clearly violating the rules, establishments, let's say, that are, encroaching on the minimum path of the sidewalk, structures that are encroaching on bike lanes or the roadway even. Right now we're a bit hamstrung by, lack of manpower.
Yeah.
But unclear guidelines. But the future program will have clear guidelines, more robust rules for restaurants to follow, and a detailed enforcement arm by DOT.
And I can, if I could just add to that too, these are good questions. So I presented to the City Planning Commission this afternoon. It was a much longer presentation that went into a little more detail on these like specific design things. We get into measurements and sort of what certain proposed rules are. So, I think this brings up a good point with ClearPath. In the old Sidewalk Cafe program, it was 8 feet ClearPath required or 50%, whichever was greater. So minimum 8 feet. If the wider the sidewalk is, it had to be 50%. So if you had a 24-foot sidewalk, then you needed a 12-foot clear path on that area. We are proposing modifying that by having 8 feet and having a 12-foot minimum requirement for busy areas. And then just in general, these restaurants will kind of have to apply and show DOT the setup for their establishment and prove that they can meet that. I think what you're seeing right now, what you could be seeing, I don't want to speak for you, but there are restaurants that are kind of not meeting that 8-foot clear path. They're supposed to be. But we're in the emergency order. We've been trying not to overfine and put restaurants out of business. And they've been really, necessary to have outdoor dining because of certain restrictions. And they still do have restrictions because you have to be vaccinated in order to dine indoors. So there are communities but you don't have to be vaccinated to dine outdoors. So, this permanent program that we're proposing really is meant for a post-COVID world, which I think we're all hoping we get there, where they're not as reliant on the outdoor dining for the sake of their business. That's what's been the case the last year and a half. When we've had restrictions on the indoor dining, they've really needed the outdoor space. So they have cheated a little bit on ClearPath and stuff like that. But, we have a much longer presentation where we've gone into that. Don't want to, keep everyone here all night tonight. But I will also say we are announcing in a press release this week a multi-agency task force on the design guidelines and sort of laying out the engagement process that will be coming pretty soon. And so we, look forward to working with community boards, especially people like yourself with expertise in design and architecture, so we can discuss on, how to make this program work. The text amendment, it's really focused, again, I just want to reiterate one more time, it's really focused on geographic restrictions, zoning, like who and where can they have cafes, like sort of neighborhood criteria rather than the sidewalk criteria. That's always existed in the admin code rules. Those are going to be updated and improved when we transfer the authority of that from DCWP, Department of Consumer Workforce Protection, to DOT, and that will have to go through a capital rulemaking process where we'll also come back for community input. So it takes a long time to change these rules. We can't really do it overnight. And the city's referred to the charter and all the legal processes we have to do to, make these changes for the permanent program.
Anybody else from the committee?
I have two quick questions. This
Who's
is
that?
Natalie.
Okay.
Will restaurants have the option to do both a sidewalk cafe and a road cafe, or is it one or the other?
They'll have the option to do both as long as both the sidewalk and the roadway cafes meet the appropriate criteria, which are, similar, but will be more stringent, similar to the emergency program, but more, stringent. So for example, you can't be in a bus lane, you can't be in a hydrant for roadway cafes. It's limited just to the parking lane. If there's a bike lane there, that they can't build over the bike lane. So that has been the case through the emergency program, but some people have, broken that. And then sidewalk cafes, again, as long as you meet the appropriate, you're on a wide sidewalk street, you're not obstructing the clear path that's required, you'll be able to have a sidewalk cafe.
And then the other question is more for the roadway cafes. In areas where you have multiple restaurants in one street, would there be like a cap as to the number of restaurants that can sort of close off the parking? Or is it, if a whole block is full of frontage, restaurants with frontage, can they potentially kind of close the street to parking for a roadway cafe?
I'll start, Navardo, and then if you want to weigh in as well. Working with the project team, we've thought a lot about this, that we've got a lot of feedback from other community boards on this. We don't really expect putting like a hard cap of numbers of restaurants that could participate on any particular block, just because the blocks are very different. The business frontages of restaurants will be very different. They're limited to their frontage, so that may change what you're seeing right now, because many restaurants have used adjacent spaces during the emergency program. But DOT does want to have the ability to review to ensure that, safety and access of the street is not compromised by having too many roadway cafes on it. So we're not really anticipating like a hard number cap that we can give you, but I will say that DOT in licensing these will have a database, will have visualizations, and they'll be able to use, their traffic engineers to evaluate, is this causing particular concern on this block to have too many restaurants, in which case they may not be able to approve, the last ones applying into the program if other ones are. But we didn't really want to get in a thing where certain restaurants could be in and other ones can't, when the same citing criteria applies to them, and they're all following it. So that's sort of our answer for that, is that, DOT will take a further look at areas where there are multiple applications for roadway cafes to ensure that, they're still safe, and that, all the other agencies and life and safety can still be met.
Yeah, Ben, I think that answered that. I have nothing further to add. That kind of sums up.
Anybody and any other committee members? If not, I have a few questions. Number one, are catering halls also eligible for these sidewalk cafes, or just real restaurants?
Sorry, I missed the beginning of the question.
Catering halls, you have catering, you have a number of places that have catering halls that say occupy the entire block or an entire corner. Are those catering halls also considered restaurants for the purposes of these sidewalk cafes?
No, we don't expect them to be eligible in the permanent program. It's limited to restaurants with the letter grade
Okay.
certificate from Department of Health, and yeah.
Number two, restaurants. There are some restaurants that, in a sense, built into a strip mall. We have parking lots like you have cars lined up in front of those restaurants. Are those restaurants going to be able to have these sidewalk cafes also? Because then you also have the problem with their parking lots and people coming in and out of the parking lots, and also the roadway.
So is the question, can they have a sidewalk cafe on the sidewalk, or are they building something
sidewalk
in the parking lot?
Well, they're not going to want to kill their parking lots.
Right.
The question is, can they have them on the sidewalk when they have those parking lots that are, in a sense, that are off-street parking lots, but are still right next to the sidewalk? So, and I'm using examples of strip malls more than anything else for that.
Right. I think in that instance, it depends on the width of that sidewalk in front of the commercial district.
Okay.
And also, I wouldn't expect them to do, really extensive sidewalk cafes. It may just be a couple tables and chairs outdoors for their customers. There is no limit on how small someone wants to build a sidewalk cafe, but there are caps on how large a sidewalk cafe can be.
Okay, my final question is, you do not have a specific text amendment yet. That's correct. Am I correct?
No, we do have a text amendment. The text amendment is removing Article 1, Chapter 4, the sidewalk cafe regulations regarding sort of the locations we went over on where cafes are allowed. They're allowed everywhere right now during the emergency program because those zoning laws are suspended. To roll out the permanent program, we're proposing to delete that chapter to allow anyone to potentially apply to the permanent program as long as they meet the sidewalk cafe regulations. The sidewalk cafe sidewalk citing criteria. That citing criteria exists in DCWP's admin code rules. We're proposing to move that. That's not part of the text amendment, but that is proposed to be moved from DCWP to DOT. That will have to go through the CAPA rulemaking process, which will require more outreach on. But all of that will be suspended until the rollout of the permanent program. So as we're working on these tweaks, we'll be working on them, but all of the rules will be suspended. So we won't be left in a lurch of there will be no regulations. How it's operating now is how it will operate until we can launch the full program.
Maybe I misstated. Your text amendment now is just to remove something. It is not to add something to the zoning amendment.
Correct. Yeah, it's just to remove these zoning locational prohibitions. Like, in order to apply for a sidewalk cafe, you had to have appropriate zoning in order to do it first. If you didn't have the appropriate zoning, you just could not apply for a sidewalk cafe, even if you were on a wide sidewalk street and you could show that you could build a beautiful sidewalk cafe. So we're really just removing that sort of step on the process, but there's still a process, and they will still have to come to the community boards for review and input.
Thank you. Any more questions from any more members of the committee? No. If not, then Mr. Health Commissioner Navarro, I thank you very much. We're now gonna have to make our decisions about what our recommendations will be to the full board. Again, members of the committee. All right, we have two. Do we want?
Well, I'll just say real quick, thanks for having us, Ken and Bronx Community Board 11. These were all really good questions, and there's a lot of good feedback. So I appreciate it.
You can stay. You're welcome to stay for the rest of it. And
I'll listen to the vote. Yeah. Probably turn my.
then.
So, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Ken, thank you very much. I have to leave, unfortunately, but I really appreciate you giving us the time to present today. And I would just say if folks have more questions, obviously, you can have the district manager reach out to me with any additional questions. And again, as I said, we'll be back next year to talk more about the permanent program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mustafa. Members of the committee, anybody have a motion about the two Planet Fitness? Do we have any discussion about whether on Planet Fitness let's take each of those locations separately. First, the location, the Gun Hill Road location. Does anybody have a motion to make about whether we should approve, whether we should recommend that the full board give a letter of no objection as to the application? Does anybody have a motion, or if not, I will make a motion. I would like to make a motion that on the 17th, I think it's 1750 East Gun Hill Road, that we recommend that we have the board have a letter of no objection as to the special permit, and including the 24-hour operation. Is there a second to the motion?
Yeah, can I second that, John Johnson?
Any discussion on that motion? All in favor of the motion? 100%. Is there any objection to the motion? Are there any abstentions on the motion? I'm assuming at that point, everybody else is in favor of the motion. The motion carries unanimously. On the second application for 2129 White Plains Road. Does anybody like to make a motion on that? All right, in that case, I'm going to make a motion. I would like to do a little bit of discussion first, because I'm worried about having a 24-hour operation over there. Does anybody else have any reservations about the 24-hour operation on White Plains Road? Answer is no, because nobody's coming in on it. John, everybody in?
Yeah, I'm in. I make a motion to approve. If I could, did you make that motion already, or
no? I didn't make the motion. You want to make the motion? I'll take your motion.
Yeah, I'm taking a motion to approve the letter of no objection for the White Plains Road site for the 24 hours and renewing.
I'll second the motion. With discussion, does anybody else have any reservations about the 24-hour operation on White Plains Road? Answer is no. Call for a vote on the motion. Any objections? Any no votes on the motion? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. St. Jacques and Mr. And I forgot the other guys. And
Thanks so much for hearing us tonight.
Villafana, is he there still now?
Chase ran, but I stayed on. I really appreciate the time you afforded us, and look forward to seeing you in the future. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Night.
On the DOT, I would like to make a motion that we recommend that the board approves or recommend that the DOT, that the text amendment, which is essentially removing part of it, not doing anything else, let me start it again. I'd like to move that we recommend that the text amendment, that the proposed text amendment, that the board have no objections to the proposed text amendment. Do I have a second on the motion?
Yeah, can I second? Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, we're all seconded. All in favor. Well, let's try it So will anybody opposed to the motion? Any abstentions? So everybody's in favor. We're going to recommend that they have no objection to this text amendment, which just removes part of the signing requirements. On that, members of the committee, it's now 9:09. I want to thank everybody, and I just appreciate everybody's patience here. And I would like to say that thank you everybody for participating. I'd like to say good night, and I think we can end the meeting now. I'm going to turning off the recording at 9:09. Good night, everybody, and we'll try to get minutes and everything else before the next meeting. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Ken. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
No, no, no.
Good night. Good night. Good night.